When systems feel stable, people store value in metal: gold, silver, coins locked in safes, bars buried underground. We are taught that wealth survives collapse. History says otherwise. You cannot eat silver, you cannot boil gold, you cannot plant a coin and expect calories. Yet, when crises arrive, real ones, wealth stops being abstract. It becomes physical, immediate, biological. In every true collapse, survival does not belong to those who own value. It belongs to those who can produce it. When currencies fail, metals still shine, but stomachs still empty. When markets freeze, numbers remain intact, but shelves go bare. And when desperation replaces stability, food becomes the only language that matters. History is brutally consistent here. Those who survived did not do so because they were rich. They survived because they could eat. There is one seed, small, ordinary, easily overlooked, that has fed people through famine, siege, hyperinflation, and total system failure. It has done so quietly, reliably, again and again. It does not glitter. It does not impress investors. It does not sit in vaults. But it turns soil into food when nothing else will. And that breaks a rule modern society rarely questions. Because if survival depends on seeds instead of assets, the entire idea of security changes. It stops being financial. It becomes biological. If this way of thinking matters to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Roots of Survival. It helps keep this knowledge alive for those who may need it. Stay with me. What you're about to hear could change how you see survival. Food systems look permanent until they aren't. Supermarkets depend on fuel. Fuel depends on stability. Stability depends on forces far beyond individual control. History shows the pattern clearly. When supply chains fracture, shelves empty in days. When currencies inflate, food prices rise faster than wages. When conflict cuts transport, calories vanish first. In those moments, silver still has value, but no utility. You can trade it if someone else still has food. But when everyone is hungry, trade collapses into biology. Calories become currency. Protein becomes power. Seeds become survival. What determines who eats is not status or savings. It is access to renewal. A sack of grain is finite. A freezer full of meat eventually spoils. But a living system, one that grows, regenerates, and multiplies, buys time. Time to adapt. Time to endure. Time to rebuild. The difference between panic and endurance is not wealth. It is regeneration. A household that can grow food does not wait for relief trucks. A community that understands seed cycles does not collapse overnight. A system rooted in biology bends instead of snapping when pressure arrives. This is why certain foods matter more than others in crisis. Not because they are rare, but because they are repeatable. This is not about stockpiling. It's about continuity. It's about understanding which forms of security persist when systems fail, and which ones disappear the moment stability breaks. And one seed, more than almost any other, has proven itself under pressure. Long before banks, markets, or metals, humans understood value differently. Value was measured in harvests, in stored grain, in seeds passed down through generations. A family with seed had a future. A family without it did not. Across cultures, one crop appears again and again during scarcity, not because it was rare or sacred, but because it worked. Legumes, beans, lentils, peas. They were not just food, they were systems. Indigenous farmers understood something modern agriculture often forgets. Legumes feed people and soil at the same time. They pull nitrogen from the air and lock it into the ground, restoring fertility where other crops slowly strip it away. They turn exhaustion into recovery. In depleted land, legumes were often planted first, not for yield, but for healing. They prepared soil for everything that followed. In Mesoamerica, beans completed the triad with maize and squash, balancing calories, protein, and soil health in a single system. In the Middle East, lentils carried civilizations through drought cycles that would have destroyed grain only diets. In Asia, soybeans and mung beans rebuilt fields after floods, wars, and abandonment. These seeds were never glamorous. They did not signal wealth or power, they signaled continuity. They stored easily without technology. They sprouted reliably after long dormancy. They produced protein without animals, pasture, or constant water. They were insurance written into biology. Quiet, repeatable, forgiving. And in times of crisis, when trade stopped, when animals died, when fields failed, these seeds became irreplaceable. Not because people believed in them, but because generation after generation had tested them against hunger, and they endured. When Rome collapsed, grain shipments stopped. But local legumes kept villages alive. Centralized systems failed first. Local food knowledge endured. During the siege of Leningrad, one of the longest and most brutal blockades in history, bread rations shrank to almost nothing. People boiled wallpaper paste, leather, and sawdust. Those who survived longest were often the ones who had stored peas, beans, or lentils. Foods that could be stretched, soaked, cooked, and shared. In the Irish famine, potatoes failed catastrophically. But where beans were grown, families gained time. Not enough to save everyone, but enough to endure longer, to migrate, to survive. During World War II, European cities were reduced to rubble. Fields were bombed. Transport collapsed. Families planted legumes in courtyards, roadside soil, and vacant lots. Victory gardens depended on them not for flavor or prestige, but for protein, the hardest nutrient to replace when animals disappeared. In the Great Depression, rural families who endured longest were those who could grow and store dry beans. They required no refrigeration, no fuel, no machinery. They waited patiently through winters and shortages, turning soil into sustenance year after year. More recently, during Venezuela's economic collapse, meat vanished from shelves almost overnight. Communities returned to beans as primary protein, not because they wanted to, but because they worked. The pattern is consistent across centuries and continents. When systems fail, seeds outperform assets. And among seeds, legumes endure longer than almost anything else. One handful planted can feed a family months later. One harvest can be saved, replanted, multiplied. Silver cannot do that. Modern food systems are not built for resilience. They are built for throughput, speed, uniformity, predictability. Legumes disrupt that model. They do not require constant inputs. They reduce fertilizer demand. They improve soil instead of exhausting it. That makes them biologically efficient, but economically inconvenient. Industrial agriculture profits from dependency, from repeat purchases, from annual seed cycles, patented varieties, and chemical inputs that must be reapplied every season. Legumes close loops instead of opening markets. They feed soil microbes instead of fertilizer companies. They restore nitrogen instead of consuming it. They regenerate land instead of depleting it. And systems built on extraction rarely celebrate regeneration. So the story changed. Legumes were reframed as secondary, as filler, as food you ate when better options were unavailable. From staple to side dish, from survival food to poor people's protein. From foundation to afterthought, meat became the symbol of strength and prosperity. Grains became the backbone of calories. Processed foods became the answer to convenience. Legumes remained, quietly, but without status. Agricultural education shifted toward yield per acre, not resilience per decade. Policy favored crops that moved easily through global markets. Research followed profitability, not longevity. Knowledge didn't disappear overnight. It faded gradually. Not because legumes failed, but because systems no longer needed people to know how to feed themselves independently. And seeds that make people less dependent, less desperate, less predictable, are rarely prioritized. They don't vanish, they're simply forgotten. Modern research has only reinforced ancient practice. What people learned through hunger, science later measured in data. Legumes provide complete protein when paired with grains. They supply fiber, iron, folate, magnesium. They stabilize blood sugar during scarcity, preventing the energy crashes that make famine deadlier than simple calorie loss. But their real power lies underground. Rhizobia bacteria living in legume root nodules fix atmospheric nitrogen and convert it into forms plants can use. This is not a supplement. It is not an additive. It is a biological partnership refined over millions of years. Fields planted with legumes rebuild fertility naturally. Soils regain structure. Microbial life returns. Subsequent crops grow stronger without external inputs. In degraded land trials, legumes consistently restore productivity faster than synthetic fertilizer alone. Chemicals feed plants directly. Legumes rebuild the system that feeds plants. They also outperform animal protein under pressure. They require a fraction of the water. They convert sunlight to calories far more efficiently. They emit dramatically fewer greenhouse gases. And they remain productive under drought, heat, and poor soil conditions. From a systems perspective, legumes are among the most efficient calorie to resource crops humanity has ever relied on. They are not innovative. They are not experimental. They are foundational. Science didn't replace survival knowledge. It explained why it worked. And in a future defined by constraint, efficiency rooted in biology will always outlast efficiency built on inputs. Climate change will not reward fragile systems. Heat will disrupt grain harvests. Water scarcity will strain livestock. Energy costs will ripple through every calorie we consume. The systems that fed billions were built for stability, predictable seasons, cheap fuel, reliable transport. That stability is fading. And when it does, survival will not belong to those with the most assets stored away. It will belong to those with the most options. Options that grow. Options that regenerate. Options that do not depend on constant delivery. Seeds are options. Knowledge is leverage. Biology is resilience. Silver may still hold value in trade, but trade assumes someone else has food to offer. When scarcity deepens, metal becomes symbolic. Calories become real. You cannot plant silver. You cannot multiply it. You cannot feed children with it. But one seed, planted and replanted, can outlast currencies. It can outlast borders. It can outlast systems built on extraction instead of renewal. Legumes have done this before, through empires rising and falling, through wars, famines, and climate shifts. They fed people quietly while systems collapsed loudly. They will do it again. Because what endures is not what shines, it is what returns. If this kind of forgotten survival knowledge matters to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Roots of Survival. Every like, every share helps keep this knowledge alive and puts it back where it belongs, in the hands of people who may one day need it. We did not lose this knowledge, we forgot it. And forgetting is not final.